Meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Arnold,
I'm here.
Mr. Albright,
Here.
Ms. Banks, Ms. Bell. Here. Mr. Brown,
Here.
Ms. Carter, Ms. Clark. Here. Dr. Albright. Here. Ms. Friedman,
Oh, here.
Reverend Gordon.
Here.
Ms. Harding, Ms. Howe, Ms. Mendoza-Locke. Here. Ms. Rodriguez. Here. Dr. Sadak. Andrew White.
Here.
Thank you. Let's recognize our visitors, starting with Richard in the back row.
Richard Arnold. Patrice Flowers, board staff.
Jason Powell. Phil Stone, board staff.
Shannon Nash, board staff.
Yeah.
Tina Mason, board staff. Amy Perkmeyer, board staff.
Welcome to all of you. Have the board members had a chance to look at the minutes from the December 3rd meeting?
Yes.
Are there any additions or corrections?
None that I saw.
Entertain a motion to approve.
I move to approve them as submitted. Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Motion carries. The treasurer's report goes to Jenny.
Financial statements are on page 7 for November. And the biggest variance you'll see in the revenue is under the miscellaneous line. And that is mostly due to Danny's Place. And that's just timing. We think that that's gonna catch up throughout the year. Because we had budgeted an even amount throughout every month, but it's not working out to be exactly that.
Do you mean we're not just drawing out things on just?
Exactly. But we are seeing significant expenses come through on that for the last month was over what we had budgeted. So we are seeing the pickup of that. It's just taking some time to catch up to it. And then you see that same variance down in the grant funded program expenses line. A majority of that $3.3 million variance is due to Danny's Place. There was also some variance for some state and federal grants that kind of got a late start in the year, but we expect those to catch up as well. And then there was a decrease in net assets for the month of November of 3.8 million, and that was mostly due to our November bi-monthly grant payments. On the balance sheet on page 8, you can see the same thing. In cash, we had a decrease of about 2.8 million. Mostly due to the bi-monthly grant payments. And then you can also see a pretty significant reduction in accounts receivable, and that was due to fiscal year 24 accrued revenues being received. Our non-designated board fund balance at the end of November is just over 13.2 million, which is actually quite low for November for us. And there are payments on pages 9 through 11 and a motion on page 6. And I can answer any questions anyone has.
You said that's low, what's normal?
So our fund balance in general is a lot lower than it has been for the last several years. So we've been talking about the fact that we either need to increase revenues or decrease expenses. So for November is generally not one of our lowest period months. Our lowest period months are usually in July, right before we get our August levy payment. And then the other one is usually the other half of the year. So it's usually February, right before we get our March payment.
Okay.
So we're typically not down to 13 million in November.
Okay.
Any other questions for Jenny? Comments? The motion on the bottom of page 6.
So moved.
Second. Motion was, has been a motion made and seconded. The bottom of page 6, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The financial statement is approved. Item number 7, we're going to divide, Jenny's going to take,
Six.
oh, 6. Jenny, number 6, please.
That is on page 12 of your packet. So most of our agencies that get a provider agreement with us have a June 30th fiscal year end, and their audited financial statements are due to us on December 1st. And per our provider agreement, we can withhold funds if they do not submit the audit on time. So that's what this section, this write-up in motion is about. We had 3 agencies as of the time this was written who were still late in their submission. We have since last week, received Sophia Quintero's audit and management letter. So there will be an amendment to that motion, but we are still waiting on the audit for Center of Hope Family Services and Unison Health. So the motion on the middle of page 12 is to withhold payments of funds until they submit the audit, and then we'll pay them what they were due for Center of Hope Family Services and Unison Health. So there would be an amended motion there to remove Sophia Quintero Art and Cultural Center. And I can answer any questions that anyone has on that.
Any questions for Jenny about the motion or the concept? So we have a motion in the middle of page 12 that's been amended by removing Sophia Quintero. It simply relates now to Center for Hope and Unison. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to approve it.
I move on the amended motion.
Is there a second? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? The motion carries as amended. Now, get to number 7, and we're gonna divide this. Jenny's gonna take A, and Scott's gonna take B.
Okay, so part A is at the bottom of page 12, and this is a little bit confusing, so I'm gonna try to make it as clear as I can. So you have approved funds for the Lucas County Guardianship Services Board based on our fiscal year, which runs July through June 30th. And that was $335,000. The contract for the Guardianship Services Board runs on a calendar year. So it actually ended on December 31st, 2024. So in order for that to continue into 2025 and a new contract to be signed, we need to extend the funding for the second half of fiscal year, or calendar year 2025. So the motion there is to allow Scott to enter into a contract with the Guardianship Services Board for calendar year 2025, and then allocate an additional $167,500 for the period of July through December 2025. Because you have already allocated the first 6 months in our initial.
But we approved it in the budget to begin with.
The first 6 months you already did.
Okay, so
So this would be additional that you have not already approved.
But it is in the forecast.
Correct.
yeah, you were reading my brain, okay. Yeah, that's, I wanted to make sure we had forecasted for it, okay.
So
moved.
there's a second.
Second.
Is there any further question, discussion? Just to make it clear that the 335 is the total for the calendar year, but the first half of that has already been approved and is in the budget.
Yes.
Okay, so the additional 167,500 is
Yes.
this year.
Yes.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Okay. Scott?
Okay, so along with that, because we fund the Guardianship Services Board by Ohio Revised Code, we also get a position on their governing board. There are 3 members of their governing board, 1 appointee by the Mental Health Services Board, 1 appointee by the Lucas County Board of Developmental Disabilities, and 1 appointee from the Lucas County Probate Court. Those 3 appointees were all appointed for the same period four-year term. Meaning the three new board members were appointed on the same start date and end date. Two of those three have indicated that they are not interested in being reappointed. Mr. Goyer, our appointee from the first term, is willing to continue to serve. He is the current president. I believe that it's in our best interest to recommend his continued appointment because of our interest in the Guardianship Services Board and the services that they provide to our wards. I think that, or to their wards that are in our system. I think that a turnover of all three board members is untimely, and I think that the organization would be best served with having some institutional knowledge. The other thing it'll allow them to do is work towards changing their bylaws so that they can do staggered, which Mr. Goyer has indicated an interest in being the first one out the door. But he also wants to preserve that institutional knowledge as well. So there is a recommendation for his reappointment for the terms of January 1 through December 31 of 2028. He can continue to serve until he's either reappointed or somebody else is appointed in his place. So they're still able to function.
So are the other two members who are going off, they're gonna stay until somebody else comes on?
So I'm aware that a new person has been appointed by probate,
Okay.
but I'm not aware of who DD has appointed. And by the way, I don't know if it's public or knowledge, but we'll make it public knowledge. Probate court appointed a friend of ours who served on this board previously, Mr. Andre Tiggs.
Question,
Yes.
has there been any discussion with the two trustees that were interested in reappointment by their appointing entities, as to, thoughts by, just out of curiosity?
I can tell you that the first term was rough on the trustees. There was a lot of building, as you know, because you served in that consulting capacity originally. And one of the trustees that I believe was the current probate or the previous probate had many other interests that just wouldn't allow her to participate at that level. The other one, which was, I believe, no, it was actually the other way around. Probate was this one that I'm talking about.
I just wondered, I don't
Time
necessarily.
commitment really just crushed them.
For the
and-
reason?
Neither of them just could commit to that. Mr. Goyer feels the same way, but is willing to spend a little bit more time for the sake of the model that, and the institution itself. So, yeah, it was a heck of a commitment, those guys. I mean, they're built, not only did they build a program from scratch, but they also had to form a county department at the same time, which really hadn't been contemplated in the discussions, even as you remember, as we were writing policies. And it became a lot more than it what they signed on for.
So it'll be a smoother transition? Let's go.
So I would hope that they will continue to provide quality service. I can't speak to a transition since I don't run that organization. But we do know that they continue to provide quality service to the people in our system, and that's what we want to preserve.
Any other questions for Scott or comments?
Pardon me?
Did they find the location?
Yes, they are located in the government center.
All right, there's a motion in the middle of page 13 that would reappoint Mr. Boyer for a 4-year term, with the understanding that it could be up to a 4-year term. Play out. We ought to add that we thank him for his service.
Absolutely.
Because this is, he didn't have to do this. So, is there a motion? Is there a
So moved.
second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. All right, Jenny, COVID mitigation funds.
This is on page 13 of your packets. So we received a little over $107,000 of COVID mitigation funds from Ohio Mass. And if you'll remember back in April at the board meeting, you allocated $70,000 to ZEF and just over $37,800 to Unison Health for their projects. Unison was able to spend all of their funds. ZEF spent a little over $28,000 of their allocation. So that left unspent $41,721.60. We inquired with OMAS if those funds could be used for the HVAC system at Danny's place, and they agreed that that was an allowable use of the funds. So the motion on page 13, the first one is to amend ZEF Center's MOA to decrease it from 70,000 to 78,278.40, which is what they spent, and then allow us to use the 41,000 for Danny's place HVAC.
I think we could take these two motions together. Are there any questions for Jenny? Any comments? Yeah,
So
Christine.
does that 41,000 then take away from that fundraising goal?
Yes.
It reduces from 680 to 640.
Yes.
And
Assuming all the bids come in the way we think they should come in.
Do you know what percentage of the HVAC system that will pay for?
I don't know that, no, I don't do. I mean, we could get that for you.
No, it's okay. Curious.
It's all spec'd out and the costs are already in the,
Yeah,
So we could
I
pull
would
it
hope
out.
so at this point.
yeah.
Yeah, we're under roof.
I think they're sitting on the roof already.
All right,
So
so we've
moved.
got these two motions toward the bottom of page 13. Is there a motion to accept them?
So moved.
Second? We have a motion of approval and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstention? The money is moved and the motion's carried. All right. The landlord incentive program, that is Elijah, I believe.
Well, you'll see the landlord incentive program, which is a funding scheme from Ohio Mass to provide little incentives to landlords to accept some of the hard to place people we have in the system. These are not class 1 facilities, class 2 facilities. They're for actual places with standard landlord-tenant agreements. So we have a couple of agencies who are utilizing these funds to provide up to $2,000 for an incentive, saying, hey, will you take this, will you consider taking this person? At the October board meeting, Ohio Mass had allocated us some money. They had to go back and see how much money they were going to allocate from this part of the year. So they've given that allocation, which is an additional 22,000 and some. And so this is just accepting that allocation so we can put it in our pool for agencies to use as they continue to work with landlords to incentivize them.
Are there any questions for Elijah about this program and this motion? We have a motion that's proposed on the top of page 14. Is there a motion to approve? Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Motion carries. Elijah, health officers.
So the health officer advisory met and we approved 4 new applicants and 2 renewals. You'll see them at the bottom of page 14. Their demographics are included in the paragraph, as we consider kind of the diversity of our health officer makeup. So on the next page, for your interest, you'll see kind of demographics of the entire system. Really, when we started collecting this information to the monthly expenditure for December of 2024.
And these folks are included in the chart?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, we have a motion to approve these folks. It's in the middle of page 14. Anybody care to move that?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve these individuals as assistant health officers. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions, the motion carries.
May I ask a question?
You may, absolutely.
Elijah, I mean, it seems to me that there isn't a lot of diversity
Yeah,
in
that's
this
what I was
pool. And I'm wondering, what are we doing actively to increase the diversity
Yeah.
in the health officers?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We've been really encouraging our partners for years now to consider recruiting and retaining and getting through the alpha officer training, qualified people to become alpha officers. But honestly, this is this issue within the diversity of licensed profession is really beyond kind of your national department. We're talking about disparities in pass rates for like social workers, like around college graduates are having difficulty becoming licensed, which is a requirement to become a health officer. Notwithstanding, they're still really strongly promoting that. Our agencies are committed to the health equity efforts. We have that outlined in our contract agreement. It's just with turnover, you might have a qualified candidate. So the qualifications, you have to have at least 2 years experience. You have to have first aid, CPR, and crisis intervention training, which they have to have as part of their employment. And then you have to attend the health officer training, which is kind of scheduled as needed. There has to be enough health office candidates to schedule the training to make it worth it. And then they have to go through the process of filling out the application, getting letters of recommendation, sending us all that information. And so sometimes by the time they might go through the training to pulling all the paperwork, they would have left the agency with the high turnover. So it's not for lack of trying to recruit more. It's just a kind of a national issue with just licensed professions, and then kind of the ongoing workforce issues around turnover and retention.
So I wanna say something about this, on that as well, though, because the statement was made, there's not a lot of diversity. What, in your opinion, should that number be?
Well, it should represent the demographics of whoever you're serving.
Serving or Lucas County residents?
Well, Lucas County, yeah.
Alright,
I mean, how we arrive at the number of designated health officers?
well, there isn't a number, we can continue to approve as many as
Okay,
are available.
that goes back to reasons.
But I'm not pushing back, I'm just adding reality to it. It's a math problem, right? The number of minority of identified health officers compared to the overall. I don't have my phone here, but if somebody wanted to do the math, and the numbers, by the way, are off by 1. 17 are,
They didn't report.
1 didn't report.
Yeah.
17 are minority of the 80. That's 15%, 17%, somewhere in there. All right, the designated population for Lucas County minority is 28% in total, somewhere in there. 19% African American, 6 or 7% Hispanic, Latino, and then 2 or 3 other, so we're off 5%, maybe 8%, 10%, somewhere in there. Four I bring it up because it's attainable, is my point. It's attainable. When we break it down to the number, it's attainable. And so that's really what we need to focus on here is what are we doing to attain that equitable participation?
And what pipelines are being created, like how intentional are we about, and sometimes by the time you get to the end, it's too late. You almost have to go back to the very beginning and start much younger, developing and looking like over a 10-year span and instead of like at
Felicia,
the end.
Felicia, we've addressed this so many, I mean, we've been talking about this since I've been on the board in 2018.
Right.
How do we do this? Where do we go? We're not the providers. That's part of it, right? So the providers are doing the hiring and they're doing, the question is, what are they doing to incentivize?
And if they're not reaching their numbers, it comes back to us, what are we doing? Like, what's the consequences if
Yeah, but what's the
they're
number?
not
We don't want
making
DEI
these
hires
Yeah,
either.
so I think it's a larger conversation, it's just not hiring people.
Right.
It's hiring licensed people. And we know, I'm sure we've all seen, there is a list of like Black, African, Black and African therapists that is short. It's a very short list and most of them do not work in our system. So we're trying to pull from a pool sometimes that's very dry.
How do we get them into our system?
How do we get them
That's what I'm talking about.
from high school to college to complete these academic programs and arrive at licensure? How do we incentivize them to work in our system and stay in our system? Because we have had applicants, I would say, we don't make it to you all because they'll send me, like, I'll have an agency send me an application and say, we're waiting on the background check, for instance, because that's required. And then the next month, I'll say, hey, we're gonna review it, and they're like, well, they left.
Well, okay, so I guess.
Lisa wanted to.
No, I'm sorry. So there was just two things I was gonna say. One is, since I came on the board, I will say in 2018, this number has definitely moved because it was a lot worse. So I will say there has been improvements, because Sid and I were just talking about that. So is it maybe where we think, where we would like to see it? Maybe, probably not, but when I think about like where it was, and the fact that at one point we weren't even tracking it. And I think we end up asking those questions, like, can we see what the demographics are? So I feel like, the fact that we're willing to, that we want to take a look, we want to see. But then the other thing too, and to what you were saying, Elijah, about the Black and brown folks in the system, because there isn't a lot of us in there, guess what? The ones that exist, they have private practices and they're making a whole lot more money, so they're not in there either. So you have to think about that too. So they're not necessarily in here because there's a shortage, and because they do want to serve people that look like them, they can make a lot of money doing it on their own versus working for a provider. So that's another issue too. So there are some,
A lot of them are in private practice.
because I know a lot of them in private
Yeah,
practice.
I mean, I'm relatively new to the board and I wasn't asking that question as if we're doing something wrong. I just see the number and think, is there a way?
Right.
I mean, I know there's systemic problems that we're not gonna solve around this table, but is there, I just wonder what that looked like in terms of, making it, I know what it looks like where I work. And most of us don't look like over about half of our client base. So when we say, and I certainly don't know so we can look at how Lucas County breaks down, but what's the breakdown of the people that we serve? Is it similar to or I'm
It's
just
higher. Minority participation in the system is higher than the distribution of minorities across the county, significantly higher. 50, I wanna say, somewhere between 45 and 50%. That would be my best guess right now.
So it doesn't, the numbers in terms of what it looked breakdown in the county aren't the same as looking like the population we serve. And I just wonder, you know, I mean, I know it's a big idea that we're not gonna solve tonight or whatever, but just think about ways to.
When Pastor and I were on the board at MPI, one of the things we did to try to address it was bring in interns from Bowling Green as undergraduates, people who were in social work programs, and try to get them interested in the system, try to show them that this could be a place they could work afterward. Interns are a real pain in the neck, and we might need to think about some incentives to get the providers to do something like that. But I remember we picked up a few people, 3 or 4 years down the road, who had gone through that internship program. It's unfortunate that we're coming up on a period of some fiscal stress, so the incentives are not going to be very big, but it's an idea anyway. Who else? Nima.
And then
I guess the one thing I would like to say, without being critical or thinking that we should tackle this, is that when the issue comes up, because I happen to know there are tons of African American licensed people in this community, that it not our explanation maybe should lead with your comment about their ability to make more money in private practice, so that someone listening who's not a member of this board and maybe is just listening for the first time at our meeting doesn't go away with the thought that our explanation is that there aren't qualified African American therapists, social workers out there that can't stay within the system long enough for us to give them a healthcare designation.
They don't stay in the system.
Well, okay, but without knowing really but we don't really know the reasons that they're not there the next month. It could be a bazillion things having nothing to do with that candidate. Their ability to get certified, their ability to pass the class, whatever. It's just something that I am sensitive if I even hear a tingle that's.
It's a microaggression.
It is.
Yeah, well, I didn't wanna say that,
Say it, girl.
but, I just, because we have a series of valid reasons, and, I mean, I think at the last time we did this, I asked about our numbers and the breakdown of it, so.
Anyone who knows me knows that I've been on the board forever. And I always bring this up. I hate when this comes up, I think people think, oh, here goes Andrea again. So I really appreciate all the discussion today. And I know that this is not gonna go away. I know that the board has really tried, because I've seen it. I've been here longer than everybody else. And I think that, I'm just glad that everyone is focused on this and talking about it.
That's right,
And then maybe others will hear this, but that I really do I'm seeing a great improvement. And thank you for the lively discussion. I really appreciate everybody's input. Thank you.
So if I may kind of cap it off a little bit, what I'm hearing is you'd like to see us consider some type of incentive program to increase the number of minority health officers in Lucas County. I think we can present a plan for you. Give us a couple months to think about how that might work.
And one thing that I think would be helpful is on this chart, you go back to the beginning and compare it to the current, but we don't have data.
You're right, we don't,
Right.
because we don't.
But let's change the chart. Let's look year over year. Let's look at what it was January 1st of '24, January 1st of '25, and so forth. That would be much more meaningful when we do have the data.
Okay, we can do that.
Can I add just one more? I'd like to just add one more thing in the context of all this, because as someone who's really worked on promoting social workers of minority backgrounds to get licensed and get their independent license. This is not a conversation that is new to me. We have issues within our academic institutions with Supreme Court decisions and interpretation of those decisions to eliminate race-based admissions, and now a lot of institutions have gone away with scholarships for minorities. So this problem starts, it starts way back, and it's becoming more complicated even to get people in the door, to get them their education paid for, to get them licensed to work in our system. There's a number of complications, not to make excuses, but that's something, as we continue to work on addressing health equity issues, that's just another complication we're gonna have to face in the next few years.
And that problem just started this year.
Yes.
So we won't see the effects until.
Yeah.
Year back.
Still, there's a pool of people to draw from, and so maybe the faster solution is to look at how to pull from that pool into the system rather than starting in 7th or 8th grade. Because when they get to the point where they can come into the system, then they're gonna have the same concerns, issues, opportunities, whatever is the appropriate noun, as those people who are already in the pool.
But it's tough to compete with private practice. That's a tough conversation.
The money is gonna have to, cause that's why they're leaving and they hop from agency to agency is because of the money and the benefits. So so the incentive needs to be something also for the agencies, what can you do to keep them there?
And I appreciate the approach that Scott has taken in the last couple of years in the Hispanic Latino community. We've struggled, not only is it, Black and brown, but then it's the cultural thing. So yeah, we can get interpreters, but we need people that can speak Spanish and understand the culture of the Hispanic community also. So that goes in a whole other layer into it. So now we're not just talking about a barrier of color, race, we're talking about a barrier of language. And so there's levels and levels and levels to this.
I'm curious, is the healthcare officer or designation not open to private practice, only to certain agencies?
The requirement is board contracted with certain credentials and training. I'll draw you back to last month's conversation about Vital Core and them not being Ohio Mass certified, and this board not willing to accept additional liability because of that organization. That same context applies to private entities. And the other side of that is we want to make sure that we just don't work towards the number. It needs to be meaningful. And the acute clients are not showing up at those private practices. They're showing up at the community mental health centers, the Harbor, Unison, Zeph's, New Concepts of the world. So that's where we need to focus our concentration. And there is an opportunity that we can think of, and give us a few, give us a minute to think about it. Because there's creative ways of doing it. Can you create consulting relationships with people in private practice? There's things that can be done that we just need to sit and think about a little bit, and then look at the money that we have around workforce development, because that's the pool that we would pull from, which, by the way, isn't a whole lot of money. And then we also have some current health equity funds that we could kind of push in this direction as well, to create a viable plan to incrementally move those numbers across the organizations in particular, where these individuals who would benefit from having health officers that are people of color, where these folks are showing up. Because if I have a health officer somewhere, in an agency where these folks aren't showing up, then that health officer has checked the box, but it didn't impact patient care. And that's what I think all of our ultimate goal is.
All right, good discussion,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
what I was, say again.
If you build it,
They
they
will
will come.
Yeah, I mean, it's even like if you have a list, if you're on public care and you need a dentist, and you might live in the inner city, but this dentist is in Oregon or something like that, that's where you go. And so, if we communicated that, if there's some type of collaborations that could be established with, some of the private practices, back to what you said, they'll get there.
Michael, you wanna weigh in on this? I know you've been just sitting there taking it all in, you and Bettina.
I'm just listening and, this is not something we haven't talked about or tried to address, but I think Scott's right on, if you give us a couple months, there's some partnerships we're definitely able to put together. We just did a podcast with Cecil, and Cecil, is the person over the African American, list for providers. And we just had this very good conversation about, providers being out there and us having access to those providers. And part of it is most of them are already booked. So even the conversation about getting to those people, most of the good clinicians are already booked and not taking clients. So it won't work that way. So we have to be very creative in who we were gonna recommend, how do we get more capacity, and how do we increase the capacity of our providers. This is a very complex issue. I think all of you have raised very good questions. I think now we need to have a conversation about not just how do we build it, but why haven't we already built it? And look at what was missing and how can we readdress some of those issues that maybe got missed before. And so I think you gotta give us 90 days. You said a couple months. I think it's 90 days before we really can figure out. I want to give us a buffer.
I think the other thing we need to understand is the complexity of what a health officer does.
Right.
All right, so they're coming into a what is usually a crisis situation, right? And determining if that individual would benefit from an emergency evaluation, an involuntary emergency evaluation, which means they have to be on call, they have to be available. They can't be in a private, have a schedule booked through next Tuesday and not willing to drop what they need to do in order to go see this. It needs to be immediate. And so there's a lot of layers of complication that are a part of that. All of which, unless, and I think where Michael was at, unless we're intentional about what we want to accomplish, we won't get there. So Michael said 90 days, I'm still sticking to 60.
So 80, 75.
I'm taking 6 months.
When you give us the overview of the website and how people can go in and put filters in, we have the ability to draw from those inquiries, those searches, to get a thought of how many people are asking for Black or brown therapists, male versus female, et cetera.
We will.
Okay.
We don't have it yet because it hasn't gone live yet.
Right, but
We will have that ability to be able to see that, and then to be able to see if they get there. Yeah, there will be some connection there.
okay.
I don't know how in the beginning, I don't want to say how helpful, because it's gonna be helpful, but I don't know how dense that information is gonna be in the beginning. I think that's gonna take us probably all year to be able to look at those numbers and those trends and get an idea of how they're using it. That's exactly where our conversation started, Cecil and I.
Right.
Hey, here's what's coming. Tell me how do I integrate that with what we're doing, because we're gonna make some of those people available on the app. So to your point of some of those agencies you will be able to get to those people through the app or other means, even though we don't actually fund them. But I don't know that solves our health officer issue as much as it will give you access to someone who looks like you, whether that is gender, race, religion,
Right.
etc.
Right, but that'll also maybe give us some input into Scott's question to us, what number is a good number? That might give us a sense of, that, give us some tangible, measurable answer to that.
Yeah, it definitely could be, it'd be interesting to see, to your point, if who's currently getting served, that's minority, if that number goes up, right? Because that's what we're looking for then, right? Are we pushing out far enough that that number increases, and then with that increase, where are they going? Otherwise, we're just recycling who's already there.
Right.
So our goal is not to recycle who's already there and move from step to unison. Our goal is to reach out further and say, this population hasn't been seen over here. We'll probably have a better indication that 09 wasn't being served, but now you have a 10% increase in 09, or now you have this percentage of increase, and oh, by the way, 10% of them saw an African American.
Right. And we also may learn that, based on those filters, that it's not uniquely a healthcare, what are these called? Officer issue. It may be broader than that in terms of providing care.
Yeah, I think you would definitely see that.
Yeah.
Especially as they're not, in the app, they'll be able to look at more than that. They'll be looking at housing and other things that will go outside that scope, so you're definitely.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have one piece of business left, Elijah,
love
the
this.
unison housing issue.
Yeah, so this is just for information, really. The state has now required recovery housing to be certified by either Ohio Recovery Housing or Oxford House. On January 1st, rule went in place that no entity or government entity can operate a recovery house without being certified. Through some discussions with Unison, there was a mix-up on how their property was certified, and it turns out their property is not certified as a recovery house. Therefore, we are suspending payments until they can get certified as a recovery house. So they started that process, they connected with the right people to work on that. They'll still be seeing their people who they currently have, and we have permission from the state to back pay. So, people are not going to be displaced today. We're just stopping payments until they can get that certification, hopefully, before the end of this fiscal year. So there was some confusion on, I'll just say, there was some confusion on there, and so nationally, there's 4 levels for recovery housing. Level 4 in Ohio is the same thing as residential treatment. We call it residential treatment here. Other places call it recovery housing with services inside the house. So Ohio, they said their housing was a level 4, but Ohio doesn't recognize that 4th level. They only recognize the 3 levels. So through lots of discussions and meeting with the state's now keeping a registry of all these certified houses. They're not on the registry, therefore they're not certified.
How many certified houses are there in Toledo?
We can get you that number.
Oh, you don't have to.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head, but for recovery housing, we fund nearly 200 beds of recovery housing through ZEF, from Unison, T White Hat. Those are the kind of our big ones that do recovery housing that we provide funding to. So probably somewhere around 200 beds.
Those are level 3.
1 and 2.
1 and 2.
Yeah. I think there might be some level.
So you're anticipating by June, they will have this certification?
They should have it before June.
Structural.
No, it's just the Ohio Recovery Housing, the entity that will do the certification. Will come in and review policies, look at the house. We don't anticipate any issues there. It's just, making sure they have the policies in place and then get it set.
So the intent is to hold the funding in abeyance until that matter is resolved.
And do we have a commitment from Unison to leave the guys in place there until they get paid?
Yeah, we haven't asked for that commitment, but they're committed to working to get the certification. They know that we can retroactively pay them. We've talked to them about this. And so they're not going to, send them out. Plus the other thing, I mean, the law also doesn't allow anybody to make referrals into your recovery house, including your own entity, until it becomes certified. So they're gonna have to work extra hard if they wanna keep cash flow to keep those folks in there,
They got an incentive.
because they can't bring anybody new in.
Yeah, and they also couldn't, if they were to make them leave, they would have to offer up a referral to somewhere else. They can't just send
Yeah,
them out.
this is not an adversarial thing with us and them. It's contractual. The language is very clear in our contract. If you're not certified, we can't pay you. Get certified, we'll pay you.
Sounds like it's gonna work itself out. All right, let's have an open session, starting with Richard.
If I seem frazzled, it's been a very long day on One Government Center. Administrative meeting of the county commissioners this morning. Lisa Sobiecki was elected the new chair of the county commissioners. She gave a long speech, spoke at length about the canine care facility. The only thing she said about the jail was we're looking for more funding. I didn't hear anything about, and we'll do this, that, and the other thing to make the current jail more livable. I didn't hear that. So the county commissioners had a very long meeting. It was 39 items on the agenda, and then they went into executive session. When they do that, they go upstairs to the 8th floor, and they have a little sign, which on one side is blue and says executive session, on the other side is beige, and it says open session or regular session. I waited for 2 hours for them to come out of it. I don't know what they were discussing. I know the sheriff was there. I know John Burrell from prosecutor was there, and the people from the dog warden was there. They came out of executive session, and they actually turned the sign around. So I went in after 2 hours, only to be told, no, we forgot some stuff. And they've never done that before. I've been attending county commissioner meetings since, I don't know, Jim Holzmer and Ray Kest and Sandy Eisenberg. They've never done that before. So I really thought I was lucky because I would be able to attend the 2 o'clock meeting at city council, but I wasn't. I had to sit for another 20 minutes out in the waiting room. When they finally came out of it, they just basically redid the entire table of organization at Canine Care and Control. I don't know if that's controversial, but they just completely redid that and didn't do anything else. So they set their agenda for the next year and stuff like that. So I missed the city council meeting. Short agenda at 2 o'clock. Now, this is the agenda review to put it on the agenda for next week. Among things was putting together a 7-member panel that's going to look at the salaries of both the mayor and city council. I wasn't there for that discussion, so I don't know what they did. They were going to approve some lawsuits, but it was pretty chaotic because today was the day they were going to unveil the flag. Toledo is 188 years old today. Doesn't look a day over 175. And so they went into an unannounced executive session. They went upstairs to the 21st floor. It was an hour and 10 minutes, and they invited all of these children to come. So you had all these rambunctious youngsters running around, and to keep them happy, the city council staff let them sit in the chairs of city council, and they took pictures so they can show their classmates that they took over city council for the day. But I'll see the flag tomorrow because they have another meeting there. I'm interested in next week's plan commission. Not on the agenda is a tobacco shop at 606 Reynolds Road. It was in the city journal, but it's not on the agenda next week, so I do not know if they have pulled that application or if they just asked for a deferment. But the word is out among the business community that city council is really unhappy with tobacco shops. And if you go before them, you roll the dice because if they say no, you have to wait at least a year before you can reapply. Also on the agenda for next week, the 1400 block of Monroe Street, that's right next to the Cherry Street Mission, and they're going to ask for the major site plan for the multifamily housing units that are supposed to go in there. zone change was last April, and I don't know what the delay was, whether it was funding or something else. But next week, they will hopefully get their major site visit, and then that will go to the city council sometime in February, and it's badly needed housing for homeless families. So that's just a brief synopsis of what's going on at One Government Center. Thank you.